Hey guys, welcome back to Life Up Education TV. In today's video, I wanted to talk about innovation and stay relevant to the current society, and also macro, philosophy of life. So what do I mean by that? I guess I don't prepare scripts, so I usually go authentically, and then say whatever comes to my mind at that very moment. So bear with me if I'm disorganized and all over, because I never, this is my first time trying to put my thought into word. But I wanted to try because I recently had this idea. Okay, so I think a lot of companies suffer from not being relevant to the current culture, what's popping, what is the hot trends, right? And that comes with you putting your ear to the ground and really watching out for what consumers are doing today. What is the hot thing that consumers are paying attention to? And I think we don't use the same logic when it comes to personal branding. What I mean by that is I think recently, or over the course of this journey of me pursuing Life Up Education TV, I had multiple people come up to me and tell me basically, if you want people to take yourself seriously, you need to do this and that. And I have this fashion Natsune, more a pop culture kind of account. That's called the Natsune's World, and then I have this Life Up Education TV channel, which is more serious, but really the purpose of the two is the same thing. I just want to make people happy, and in an entertaining way. So the purpose is kind of intersecting the two channels. But basically with that Natsune's World, where basically I'm just broadcasting who I am as a Natsune Oki, who is not only interested in personal development business, but also interested in what 20-something years old women are typically interested in. And when I think about it's an advantage. You have 50 years old men, you have 40 years old woman, you have all these different demographics. You can have that. We can be saying the same exact information, but depending on where the information comes from, people interpret it differently. There's actually a study that I mentioned in my book also, a study about doctor, one doctor being very likable from patient, another one being not so likable, rude doctor. And without no logical logical explanation behind, people assume that this doctor that's likable is more accurate just because he was more likable. The same thing, people are so emotionally driven. So even though we say the same shit, the same exact information, depending on where the information comes from, people interpret it differently. And I get that. But anyway, so what I wanted to say is there's also opportunity in that, in a sense that I can use who I am to relate to people who are in the same demographic. I'm a woman, I'm young, I like makeup, I like, wearing dresses, I like, dressing up and stuff like this. And this is not disadvantage, it's not negative. For me, liking that and also liking personal development, I can actually talk to or get to the audience that 50-something years old men cannot get to, just because of my appearance. I'm more relatable to some people, right? So that's one thing. And I guess I expanded that with innovation. I expanded that with being relevant to the current society, because this is a problem. I wouldn't call it necessarily a problem, but this is something that I experience because I guess I'm very philosophical person, and someone actually called me that I have an old soul. I don't necessarily feel it, but ever since I was young, I have always been kind of more philosopher, more a mature, have idea, and look at life in a very a big picture. That's who I am. And in the same token, you have to, or I guess you want to make yourself relevant to the current society, which is basically I come back to this story that I shared between the difference between relative success and absolute success. I use absolute success also to stay relevant. What do I mean? Absolute success accounts for your position, how successful you are in relation to other data points. So meaning you are comparing your success, you're comparing yourself to other people's success. That way you can measure, you can be more relevant to the current society. You can say all you want that you're successful, but if you are not successful compared to other data points, there's no way to know if you are actually successful or not in this like definitive absolute term. And that's one way to stay relevant to the current society, right? So there's an importance in that. And I once again come back to the other claim that's made by about my appearance, for example. Like, it's more that I'm just staying relevant to the current pop culture. I'm staying relevant to like what people pay attention to. Like in this personal development, the topic of personal development, there's this like demonization. I wouldn't go as far as demonization, but we talk about, let's like demonize superficial values. Let's build our character. Let's like look at like a deep happiness, and all of these things are absolutely true. But I think when we talk about practicality of life, there's a value in both. Like you can use both narration. You can use this like a superficial like social media, what is happening in the current society, how people interpret success, what is beautiful, like all that like norms. We don't have to necessarily demonize it because it's practical, like it is actually happening. Like that's how many people are perceiving or using that as a projection of how they are looking at the world. I think the better approach is like understanding that and like not let that consume you at the cost of your health, like mental health, but understanding that is actually what's going on. And there's nothing wrong with using that. Like if we talk about strategical move, like there's nothing wrong with using that if you have it. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about stay relevant and innovation versus like macro view of life. So I think you definitely need both, and I think the absolute strengths that I have is I understand the both aspects of life, where my default is way leaning more onto like a macro, very like heavy long-term thinking. But in the journey going through my life, I also have the potential and I guess capability in using like inviting innovation, using like how to stay relevant. And I mean, people are gonna die, like people are gonna like the earth circulate, like when new souls are born, old souls die, old souls die, new souls are born, like the same thing. So meaning that like if I stay relevant to the current society with this like a pop culture, like kind of like having that inside of me, I can speak to newer generation who are gonna who are gonna outwork the older generation, because older generation will be cleared away. So I can talk bigger audience that way, right? Like as time grows, like if I can stay relevant to the current society, I can not only reach the older ones but young ones as well.